Welcome. Hi, everybody. Thanks for the great music to get us all energized and get our brains running for this amazing session. I'd like to welcome you to the Radical Collaboration for Action Research on Adaptation session, which is hosted by the Adaptation Research Alliance. In the session, we aim to discuss effective solutions for adaptation. And for this to happen, we know that these solutions for climate change emerge when the vulnerable communities, practitioners, funders, and researchers work together. In the session, the Alliance will explore ways of amplifying the voices of the marginalized in processes of stimulating greater investments in action research on adaptation. So through our discussions, we will have time to focus on ways to build effective collaborations to ensure that locally led adaptation and action research is adopted. And through our engagement, we will see that we will try to incorporate all your views and your ideas through our breakout. And through this, we hope that the session will support the learning and knowledge exchange through interactive facilitation approaches. So throughout this whole session, we really aim that we can feed into the development of an inclusive and impact-driven co-creation space that will encourage radical collaboration. So just an overview on our agenda, we're going to have Bettina, who's going to give us a nice word cloud on asking you what it is when we speak about radical collaboration, what are the keywords that come up into your mind. Then we're going to have Aditya, as well as Rosalind, giving us an overview on what the ARA and what we stand for. We are then going to look at 3 iconic examples for radical collaboration. And here we're going to have a panel discussion, and Aditya is going to ask interviews and introduce our speakers in addressing these questions. And then last not least, we're going to look into the 3 breakout groups that we're going to be assigned to, where we're going to be answering, and we hope that you interact with us and give us your views, and we'll have a report back from Bettina. So with that said, I'd like to hand over to Bettina, who is a senior leading specialist at the Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center. Welcome, Bettina.
Thank you so much. And yes, the word cloud, I'm not going to give it to you. Let's make it together. And Sydney, can you please share the screen for the word cloud so we know the code for the Mentimeter? And if that is too challenging, then yes, if you can share the word cloud, there's also the link in the chat, but some people would like to maybe join on the phone. That'll be super. If you can just go into presentation mode, that'll be excellent. Now, we would like to know from you, when you think about radical collaboration, take a moment, take a deep breath, think about this particular topic, let go of some of the previous sessions you might have been attending, and say, what are the words that come to your mind when you think about radical collaboration? Thank you so much for the share screen. We already have some. Yes, you can sign in. Please go to menti.com and use the code 573811016 or use the link in the chat. What comes to mind? There's no right or wrong when you think about radical collaboration for you personally. Let's give it a little bit of time to see what comes up. Togetherness, game-changing, diversity, impactful, super, all of society, action, danger. Interesting, voices, listening, Simon and Garfunkel. Unique, challenging, respect, collaborative, unexpected, transformative. We have unexpected a couple of times. Empowered, practical, guerrilla marketing, indigenous knowledge, action, out of the box. Very good. Last moment, if you have signed in and you still want to make a submission, now is your moment to click. We'll look at this and keep this in mind as we discuss radical collaboration in this session. And for especially the hosts in the panels, have a look at the words and see if anything resonates with what you are going to share. We see three favorites, and that is different, equal, and inclusive. And maybe that is a good way to put us into the next session. Thank you so much for sharing your inspirations and your words. Different, equal, inclusive. Doni, take it away. Thank you all.
Very exciting. Thank you so much, Bettina, for that. With that said, I would like to further speak about our session, and Aditya as well as Rosalind is going to speak about the overview on what the ARA is. The main focus of the ARA is to look at the global effect that seeks to catalyze increased investment and capacity for action-orientated research. And to do this, we focus highly in developing countries. And as noted, the session is co-hosted with the Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center. Over to Aditya and Rosalind.
Hello, welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Aditya Bahadur, and I work at the Adaptation Broadcasting Company. This is the show where we raise the temperature and test the resilience of our expert guests. I'm delighted today to welcome Dr. Rosalind West, who is a senior climate science advisor with the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office and co-chairs something called the Adaptation Research Alliance. Rosalind, a very warm welcome to Adaptation Hard Talk. What is the Adaptation Research Alliance, and does the world really need another alliance, network, or community of practice focused on adaptation?
Thanks very much, Aditya. Well, it's a pleasure to join you on the show tonight, and to meet all of our listeners who are tuned in from around the world. And I do really believe that the world does need a new Adaptation Research Alliance. So COP26 coming up later this year is really a critical moment for action on adaptation and resilience. And that action needs to be underpinned by research and evidence. We have, limited resources, we've got limited time, and we've got competing priorities. And so to really deliver effective adaptation across all the sectors where we must adapt to the impacts of climate change, we really need to really pool our efforts, to coordinate our efforts, to prioritise them, to ensure that we actually know and understand what works and what doesn't for different communities who are really facing these serious and severe impacts of climate change around the world.
Now, I've heard a rumor, and you can confirm if it's correct or not. Reporters have gone out into the field, and they've heard that you have a set of principles. Is this accurate? Tell us a little bit about what these principles are, and what, in your view, another set of principles on climate-related issues is likely to add, and what, if any, impact are these principles going to have?
Yeah, so I think that the alliance itself, I think I didn't answer your first question fully. This is really a global collaborative effort across the research and action communities to really address this problem of understanding what works and what doesn't in adaptation in a much more coordinated fashion, because we've seen that there are several problems in the way that we're currently doing this, that we're not doing research at the scale or at the urgency that's needed. And the research that we are doing is happening in a bit of a fractured way. It's a very fractured landscape. There are pockets of innovation, but we're not joining up. We're not learning from each other. We're not really collaborating. I guess that's what today's session is all about. So I think another real problem that such an alliance can help us to address is really about this challenge that the research agendas themselves are not always at the moment set by the user needs. And I think we really want to tackle that. And so this set of principles is really helping us to do that and to put down on paper and for us all to agree together, how can we go about making that change? So we have 6 principles that we've been co-developing so far with the organisations who've been involved in the development of the Alliance so far. And there's still scope to change those, and with new organisations who we're going to be talking to. You know, and the aim of these principles is really to tackle, you know, what's the purpose of the research we're doing? What's the process that we're using to do that research? What are the values and the benefits of that research? And what are the linkages, and how can we really strengthen those linkages between research and action?
Right. Are we going to see these principles, or are they a secret?
No, there's no secret. They're no secret, Aditya. I think that somebody can share those for us now to make them appear on the screen. Brilliant. So we have 6 so far. You know, the wording of these is subject to change. I'm not sure we've quite got it right on all of them, and you know, we're very keen to hear through the breakout groups a bit later, you know, if there are modifications that some of the listeners might want to suggest to these principles. But we've got 6 of them. So you know, the first one is really front and center. Who or what is this research for? We really want the research to be user-centered, that it's really tackling the priority problems, and that it leads to a net benefit for those people who are most at risk. We really want to reduce the risks from climate change through this research, and that should be the number one priority for what we're trying to do. And bringing those needs in right from the beginning, I think, is all about that first principle. Then the second one is about how should that research be carried out. And we've seen through past examples, and I think we're going to hear a few more of those today, that there are real benefits to taking a transdisciplinary approach, bringing together, you know, the different disciplines, looking at the physical sciences that can help us understand the hazards, really bringing together right from the outset with the social sciences that can help us to understand the exposure and the vulnerability to those risks. Also through co-production, with the users of the research who will be, ultimately putting it into practice and making decisions in the end. So I think that second principle is really about how do we do it and who do we bring into that process. The third one is really about, how is this research valued? That the research itself and the research system, can we see a change there to really reward research that has a societal impact? And then the fourth one, I'm not sure the wording on this is quite right, but this is really about how can we strengthen those links between research and action, and ensure that actions are evidence-based. So we really, in order to do that, need to build up that evidence base. And I think this fourth principle is around building up that evidence base and bringing it into use in decision-making. The fifth one is all about strengthening capacity. We need to adapt across all sectors everywhere. And to do that, that's not going to be achieved by a few people or a few specialists here and there. That's going to be achieved through wholesale capacity strengthening. And we really need research itself that builds that capacity and that empowers actors for the long term. And then finally, no amount of research is going to help anything if we don't address some of the structural inequalities that are faced by women, by youth, by children, by disabled and displaced people, by Indigenous peoples, and by marginalised ethnic groups. So we really need research that addresses some of those root causes of risks.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Rosalind. Now, we've seen you valiantly defend the need for the Alliance. I'd like you to gaze into a crystal ball 5 years into the future. What does success look like in this crystal ball? What impact do you think these principles and the Alliance will have on the world?
Yeah, well, it's good that you asked that. We actually thought about this back in January ahead of the Gabeshina conference, where 33 different organisations came together to say that they were keen to commit to co-developing this alliance together. And there they had also looked into this crystal ball, and they said that they envisioned a world by 2030, so in the next decade, in which the research community is a very highly valued partner to policymakers, to practitioners, and to the most vulnerable communities, and that research community engages very effectively to support innovative, user-driven solutions for adaptation and resilience across all levels, from the global right down to the local level. So I think that vision is kind of captured within that declaration that was made by the organisations at Gabeshina. But I suppose there are also some maybe some nearer term milestones along the way. We really want to see scaled up capacity and funding for action orientated research. And along the way to doing that, we hope to have some activities that will help us to identify what are the priorities for that research, how can we develop new partnerships to deliver those, to co-create that research, and hoping to see a new set of long duration research programs that really tackle those priorities from the outset.
Rosalind, I'd like to push you a little bit further on that. What impact will the Adaptation Research Alliance have on the life of, say, a woman farmer in a highly climate vulnerable country, say, for example, Bangladesh? Give us something practical and tangible, and let's take a time horizon of about 5 years.
Yeah, so I think there are a number of 3 different things, perhaps. Better understanding of the risks that she might face. Better understanding of how her crops might vary because of the future climate. Better understanding of decisions that she might need to make, and how to use that information to inform those decisions, whether to plant now or whether to plant later, whether to change my crop variety or whether to stick. And then also better solutions. So, for instance, that might be new, maybe drought resilient seed varieties, or for instance. So I think we've got better understanding of the risks, we've got better decision making tools, and we've got better solutions.
That sounds fantastic. Let's see if the audience is convinced. But just to finish up, I have a few additional questions. So it seems very clear to me that you would like more and more institutions to join the ARA and support its mission. Tell us a little bit about who can join, how they can join, and most of all, why should they join? We're all committed and pulled in different directions. All of us are overworked. So please really explain to our viewers today why an engagement with the ARA is worth their time.
Yeah, so what we are looking to do here is really to engage right across the spectrum, from action through to the underpinning research that can inform it, and really actually to complete that circle so that we don't just have a chain but a circle. And I think that means that we want to bring all types of organisations and networks on board. Anyone whose activities or agenda has a bearing on how vulnerable communities and systems adapt to climate change. So that could include, public organisations at the local level, city governments, at the subnational level, local authorities, provincial agencies, departments, etc. At the national level, national government departments that are interested in either research regarding adaptation or other sciences, or funding, for international development, for instance, or it might be national agencies that are involved in, infrastructure, for instance, or ministries of finance. So I think some of those national level organisations. And I think there's also civil society actors, spanning those national, international NGOs. I imagine we've got quite a lot of those on the line today. Different research institutes, different think tanks, different networks of actors and organisations. There's an enormous ecosystem here of people who are involved in adaptation and who really want to be involved in shaping what is the research agenda, expediting that to ensure that we're really developing those solutions at pace, and then that we're deploying them at pace. So I think there's also a role finally for private sector organisations to join. That would be institutes of commercial enterprises, consultancies, research institutions, also philanthropic organisations, because and other donors, because we could do with some investment, I think, in this. And the second part of your question.
So Rosalind, you're clearly building a very big tent, but tell us how you're building the tent. How can people enter? What do they need to do to join the ARA?
So to join the ARA, what we're first asking for organisations to have a look at our principles and to engage with us through sessions like this one to really refine and finalise those principles. And then individual organisations, we're hoping that they'll be willing to endorse those principles and to share their experiences of putting them into practice. So to join the ARA, we ask that organisations endorse those principles and that they initiate some kind of process of operationalising them in some way and sharing that information with us, so that they make some commitment to the principles. we'd also like organisations to engage, in at least one of the ARA activities every year. We've got a whole load of things that are going to be happening that people can get involved with, which I think will really be of benefit. We really need to better coordinate our research efforts and better target them and build some radical collaborations to tackle these problems. And then finally, we would like organisations to participate in the governance of this alliance. This is a very member-driven alliance, and it will only work if the members really engage with that.
Rosalind, again, let me ask you one more time. I'm working for a local organization that does community-based adaptation initiatives in Odisha, in eastern part of India. Why should I join the ARA, commit my time to the meetings when I could be out saving lives and helping people deal with climate change?
Yeah, but I think that, our work happens at multiple levels, doesn't it? And some of our day is spent really focusing on that community level, and then at other times we have the opportunity to really connect to a global network of actors and achieve something far more through that interaction and through the power of that alliance. And I think that we're offering through this that by becoming part of the ARA, organisations can become those pioneers and the leaders of a systemic transformation in action research and in research for action. And I think that will happen through collaboration, through partnerships, through learning, connectivity to global networks, new partnerships, peer learning. I think it will also happen through the Adaptation Research Alliance functions, so on advocacy, so much more that we can do if we all come together to advocate for some changes that we want to see. And in this case, it's about more action-orientated research that's better targeted. There's also the research planning and coordination aspect. As people can really get involved in that, we can much better coordinate our efforts and our scarce resources. And then coming on to that, the final part I think is really around the resource mobilisation. I think through making the case for more action-orientated research as a united front, I think we can really see a step change in that investment. And I think through the organisation that you mentioned, the case that you mentioned, this is their opportunity to really shape that and to be the evidence of why we need this change.
So Rosalind, in the last couple of minutes, I heard you use the word step change, collaboration, connectivity, working together. In a sentence, or in a couple of sentences, tell us what, according to you, is radical collaboration.
I think to me, radical collaboration is about being brave. It's about being bold. It's about new horizons and new opportunities. I think it's about maybe dismantling some of the walls that we've put up around ourselves and being much more open, entering into this with open hearts and open minds. And with that, I think we can really open doors. Wow, didn't even write that down. That just came to me just then.
That's a fantastic message. One final task for you before we end this grilling. We'll play a quick word association game. Just say the first word that comes to your mind after I say a word. Alliance.
Adaptation.
Adaptation.
Research.
Partnership.
New.
Hard talk.
It's been fun, Aditya.
Rosalind, thank you so much for joining us and telling us about this brilliant new initiative and encouraging everyone who's listening to join up and support this fantastic effort. We know that you're leading a breakout group in a few minutes, so we look forward to hearing from you more. But a big round of virtual applause for Rosalind.
Thank you.
Back to you, Andoni.
Thank you so much for that. Such an interactive and engaging session of interviews. The action is not only happening in our interviews, but it's also happening on our Twitter account. So let us know what you guys think and your views. Write down your comments on our chats and tell us, how do you see the ARA moving forward? what is your first word that comes up when you think about radical collaboration? Not only just bold and being brave, but there are many other words that we could use to describe this amazing transformation process. So without further ado, I'd like to move on to our next session that looks at 3 iconic examples of what radical collaboration is. Many say it's not done, many say it's impossible, but this conversation will show you how possible it is. And I'd like to hand over to Aditya and the speakers that are going to be leading this next session. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Indoni. Now, for the next part, where we have 3 iconic examples of radical collaboration. Although the last time I said this, I was corrected by one of them who said that it's for the audience to determine whether these are indeed iconic examples or not. I'd like to welcome our guests. First, we have Lucy Mazingi, who's the Zimbabwe country representative for We Effect. And joining her will be Dr. Tom Panna, Director, the Center for Development, Environment and Policy, CDEP, at the Department of Development Studies, the School of Oriental and African Studies at London University. Lucy and Tom, a very warm welcome. You're going to talk to us today about participatory feminist action research on adaptation. We're also delighted to be joined by Jane Veru, Executive Director of the Akiba Mashinani Trust. She will talk about the truly iconic Mukuru Special Planning Area Initiative. And finally, we have Sunaina Sen, who's project manager at Resurgence, and she will talk about Daraja, a truly innovative, participatory urban climate services initiative. A very warm welcome to all of you. Lucy, we'll start with you first. Tell us in a minute or two about your initiative and give a taste to our audience about what you do and what you've done with this.
Good evening, everyone. So my name is Lucy Mazingi, based in Zimbabwe. We worked on a feminist participatory action research where we're looking at the impact of climate change on girls' education. So this was a project, a feminist participatory action research that we did in Zimbabwe and Zambia. We had 2 sites in both Zimbabwe and Zambia. And the process was that we were empowering young women. There were 8 of them from these 2 countries to analyze and take action on climate change. And we used what we called feminist popular education as a tool to run a series of workshops to develop the shared understanding of feminism. Where we're coming from is that we are meeting these young women. These are young women who are coming from various marginalized communities, but they had existing knowledge of what feminism is and what feminism ought to be. They also had experiences around climate change and how it was affecting their communities. These are young women who had faced disasters like cyclones, Cyclone Idai, floods, drought, and these areas are very dry areas in the parts of Zimbabwe, and Zambia. So we also focus so much on the gendered impacts of climate change on education. And these were highlighted by the various groups in the both countries and as a particularly important issue to tackle. So what was really transformative or radical about our approach is that we partnered grassroots young women who are most affected by climate change. And these young women had different levels of education. Some of them had gone past secondary school, others had not. So it was very empowering for them to be able to lead this research and collect the data using very innovative and exciting tools that spoke to their realities in their communities. And in this partnership, we also partnered with an academic institution, and we partnered with researchers like Tom, who's here. So the academic angle coming in with the knowledge that is coming from the ground, from existing realities, and also partnering with an international organization, Plan International. So that was very transformative and very unique. And the fact that we also had mentors who were accompanying these young girls, because we had to navigate a lot of dynamics as we're doing this process, which we ran in a COVID era within like 6 weeks. Thank you. Over.
Thank you, Lucy. My producer's telling me in my ear that we have an interesting clip from one of your community researchers who's going to talk more about this initiative. But before I go to that, Tom, do you want to add anything to what Lucy said about the project?
No, only about about why it's kind of why I think it's more a radical collaboration. But maybe you want to come to that later, or do you want me to talk now?
Yeah, we're going to come to that in a minute.
Okay.
So I'll ask our production control room to please play the film.
Hi, my name is Mwaka. I'm from Zambia. Climate change has impacted my education in a way that I'm a school leaver who's unable to go to school because of climatic-induced shocks, such as floods in my communities. I'm so passionate in contributing to climate change solutions because I'm also a victim of climate change, so why shouldn't I be passionate about it? It is important for young girls and young women to help shape climate change solutions because they are the most affected, being the marginalized group in society. So it's really important for them to take a lead and also to voice out, because if it comes from them, then it will carry more weight to say they are the most affected ones.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Despite the problems with the bandwidth, I think we got the message of this being an interesting initiative with a number of different organizations collaborating to empower people on the front lines of climate change, especially women, to lead on action research on this topic. Next, we're going to turn to Sunana Sen. Sunana, once the spotlight is on you, could you tell us in a minute or two what Daraja is, and really tell our audience the impact that it had now that it's come to an end?
Thank you, Aditya. First of all, a very good evening or good afternoon or good morning to everybody who's joined us today. It was very, very nice listening to Lucy and watching that little clip. I feel a little bit intimidated going after Lucy after that. But anyhow, so just to begin with an explanation of our project. Oftentimes, there's a disconnect between the weather information that's produced and the users of this information. This disconnect affects the user's ability to take protective or adaptive action, potentially resulting in the loss of lives, livelihoods, and assets. This disconnect is felt more profoundly by and has a greater impact on highly vulnerable populations, such as the residents of informal settlements like Kibera in Nairobi, Kigogo Bioni in Dar es Salaam, or Dharavi in Mumbai. This group is a highly marginalized group to begin with, and climate change and the impact of extreme weather makes them even more vulnerable. So our initiative, Daraja, focuses on bridging this gap. Daraja collaborates with various actors in the system to strengthen the weather communication system with the aim to make this information more actionable. So Daraja places the users, i.e. the vulnerable communities, at the center of the system itself and also the process of developing the system, rather than considering them as the last mile. This results in a system that's user-centric, inclusive, and collaborative, and ultimately produces information that is usable. So far, we have implemented Daraja in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam with UK aid FCDO funding under the UK Met Office. Now, I won't call this example iconic itself because I take your point that it should really come from the viewers. But I do consider this to be an example of radical collaboration because most of the project has been not only co-designed, but also co-implemented with the community, the national meteorological agencies, and other stakeholders. And the collaborative relationships developed between these stakeholders during the project has sustained even beyond the closure of the project. Like you mentioned, Aditya, our project in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam did come to an end a few months ago. So we have actually seen the impact of this initiative at a really grassroots level. In Nairobi, in these two cities, we have seen the impact on individuals like James, for example. As a result of the Daraja, James is now better able to make decisions and take protective actions based on these forecasts. These decisions range from more structural aspects like repairing the roof of my house, repairing the roof of his house in time for the rainy season, or even non-structural decisions like planning safe routes to work or to school for his kids. In fact, we have a film that follows the journey of James within the Raja, and that short film has been shortlisted here at CBA. I think you can find it in this under the short films panel. But I will paste a link to the film in the chat box a little later so that we can all watch it later. Back to you, Aditya.
Now this is really sounding like one of those TV chat shows where Hollywood stars come to talk about their latest films. But Surana, thank you for that. And I can vouch for the fact that this is a truly brilliant film. I've seen it and I've written a blog on it because I was so moved by it. So I encourage everyone who's listening to please check out this film on the huddle that the CBA system is based on. Next, we'll move on to Jane. Jane, thank you very much for joining us today. Once the spotlight is on you, tell us a little bit about the Mukuru Special Planning Area Initiative, how it came about, and what its salient features are in a minute or two. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I don't know. Thank you. Thank you very much. The Mukuru Special Planning Area came about because of the challenges that the people of Mukuru were facing with land tenure. So in around the year 2012, a group of people came to our offices and they told us that they were faced with eviction. And they informed us that they had been requested by the people who own the land to pay them money or they would have to leave. So they asked us to lend them some money to buy the land. So we started negotiations with the owners. But before we could complete that first transaction, we got another community and another and another. And we realized that we were facing a big challenge, a systemic change. And we also realized that we needed to understand better what was happening. So we were lucky and we managed to get a grant from IDRC. And through this grant, we created a consortium that was comprised of three universities, Nairobi University, Strathmore, and University of California, Berkeley, and ourselves and SDI. And through this consortium, we started conducting research. And these were some of our findings. One of our findings was that Mukuru, the land of Mukuru, is home to about 100,000 households that sit on about 689 acres of land. The land on which they sit on was initially government land that was allocated to private corporations and individuals to build light industries. They never did, and the land was encroached upon, and today it is completely occupied. The other thing that we found out is that because of the nature of land ownership, the lack of secure tenure, the state had not entered and planned the area, and so had failed to budget and provide basic services. So the services within Mukuru were provided by private individuals who charged the community more than 10 times more than the rest of the city were paying. So the universities told us that this was a poverty penalty, that the people of Mukuru suffered a poverty penalty. So we took this information to the city county of Nairobi, and we persuaded the city county to declare Mukuru as a special planning area. What this means is that a county government can declare an area a special planning area that has unique development challenges and opportunities. And upon declaration, it must prepare development plans within 2 years. I'm sorry, somebody's talking. Within a period of 2 years. So we realized that it would not be possible for us. We're a very small organization. We also realized the county did not have the capacity to prepare the plans. So we discussed with the county and we agreed that we help them to mobilize organizations that would help them to plan. So we mobilized about 40 organizations, and some of the organizations in this alliance were part of the organizations that were mobilized, and we created 8 consortia to help develop sector plans. And this ranged from health, education, water sanitation, roads. So there were basically 8 consortia. So these 8 consortia developed sector plans and very actively engaged the community. So the sector plans have been now completed, and the plans are now about to be presented to the county. But in the meantime, the county government has started implementing and has, in the last 1 year, has invested about $40 million in Mukuru. So they've put down roads, have built hospitals, right, done water and sanitation infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Great. Jen, I think very few people can disagree with the fact that this is truly an iconic example of radical collaboration, given the breadth of the types of organizations that came together to make this possible. The organizations working at the international level and the local level, private citizens, public agencies, all came together to make this possible. So to me, it's really an iconic example of radical collaboration. But I want to ask you, what in your view was innovative, new, or truly radical about the nature of partnerships that make this possible?
First is that we realized, first, none of us had a budget line. So we did not have money to do this work, but there was a commitment. I think we all felt a commitment to make a difference. So one of the things that I believe was very iconic was that people provided their services pro bono. So people gave of their time and their resources without pay. And I think the other thing is just the amount of resources that are there. When you look beyond money, there's so much that people have within them. So there's the knowledge they have, there's the time they have, there's the connections that they have. And all of us used all of these to bring about change.
Great. No, that's great. I'm going to turn now very quickly to Tom. Tom, reflect a little bit on what you've heard from Jane on the degree to which what we heard about from her is truly iconic. And then tell us about why you feel the initiative that you and Lucy are engaged with is also an iconic example of radical collaboration.
Yeah, Jane's example is really inspiring. It's definitely counts as iconic in my books. I think this idea of what's radical about the collaboration, and maybe even something that's missing from those principles, is about this kind of inversion of the pyramid of power, right? So it's about enabling people to empower themselves. It's about inverting the kind of priorities you normally associate with projects, and particularly research projects, right? So priorities are they're opposite. So you have the kind of empowerment, and the process is much more important than the activism and finally the academic results. So from a researcher point of view, we're not looking at like, what's the conceptually interesting point? We're actually going back and saying, okay, what's the impact of what's happened? And then back behind that, what's the process of that happening? So from an academic standpoint, that's the kind of radical nature of the collaboration we've got underway. And as you know, Jane's example as well, it's these things that start much more organically from the grassroots. I think our example at least is, it is a project where it's been kicked off with some funding to enable the facilitation, putting the mentors in place, but then equally the importance, I suppose, as well. I think Jane, Lucy and I will see like the young women themselves are the most important part of this process, and then the mentors, and then the facilitators, and then the kind of international advice. And that's the way we've set up the project. So for me, that's what's been really radical.
Right. Lucy, if I can bother you with coming in now, just do you have anything to add to what Tom has just said on why the work that you're doing really counts as radical collaboration? But more than that, also tell us a little bit about the long-term impact of what you're doing. Beyond building local capacity, what are the kind of changes that you think this initiative is likely to bring about? Lucy, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I was trying to unmute myself and I managed. Thank you. So I think in addition to what Tom has just said about our collaboration, I think when we came in with my colleague who were on the ground as facilitators, not researchers. So we're coming in to facilitate a process where the girls would really take up, all the tools and the actions and run and own the research. And so that's for us it also adds on to what we may term our practical collaboration approach. And then in terms of the long-term impact is we want to be able to have the girls leading in terms of the solution and the transformative change that we want to see on the ground. So they've come up with advocacy action plans where they want to work with various actors and various power holders to be able to transform and change and influence the process in their various communities. So you're looking at advocacy at very local level, at national level, and also taking it to global level. So that's the kind of long-term impact, apart from the empowering process that we emphasized when we spoke about this approach. That's what we are seeing in terms of the long-term interventions. And also the girls are so excited, right, to add on to their CVs that they are now researchers, and also the tools that work with them, they'll be able to use those tools to facilitate various, processes at local level in their communities.
Yeah. Great. No, that's a really clear picture. So Nana, now I want to turn to you. Paint me a picture of an initiative that is collaboration as usual, and paint me a picture of an initiative that is an example of radical collaboration, and explain why you think the Raja aligns with the latter.
Right, thank you, Aditya. So let's first talk about what is business as usual, particularly in our sphere of work, which is around weather and climate information systems. So in the case of weather forecasting, business as usual is producing forecasts in a silo, like what Rosalind said, building these walls around ourselves, and we now have to dismantle it. But yes, so there are walls within which these forecasters have been producing these forecasts. So when they're doing this in a silo, they have very little, if at all, interaction with the actual users of the forecasts. Another case of business as usual is also forecasting as a full service is focused on specific sectors like agriculture and aviation with a somewhat commercial focus, and not urban informal settlements. And finally, another case of business as usual in this sphere of work is that most of the investment goes into acquiring meteorological equipment and modeling and all of these models. But very little goes into understanding user preferences, needs, and the user's decision-making processes, and where forecasts fit within the decision-making processes. So when I think about what is radical in sort of shaking things up, and why the Raja is an example of radical collaboration, two approaches that we've taken comes to mind. One is we place the community at the center of the processes. Like what Lucy said, it's an empowering process. So we've placed the community at the center of the process and of the system itself. At the start of the Raja, the community had very low trust in forecasters. They often referred to them as liars. And even forecasters were not used to being in the same room with community members and working with them to design forecasts. So this was a radical and unusual collaboration between the most prestigious meteorologists of the country and the most vulnerable people of the country, when both of them came together to redesign the city level forecasts in Nairobi and in Dar es Salaam. Another radical approach that we took was the role of the community, the role that the community played within the project. Community members did not only contribute by way of participating in research work, like in the sense providing us data through household surveys or focus group discussions, but they were very much driving the design decisions of the project, like when we co-designed the pilot services. and also the implementation. So they also collaborated with us and led the implementation, like within the phone tree-based communication system that we piloted in the 2 cities. So rather than viewing residents as the last mile, and I put this in air quotes because last mile sort of makes us think of a linear system, and the community members sit at the end of the system as being the last mile. But rather than doing that, we took a more dynamic information ecosystem approach, and the users were very much at the center of this system, of this ecosystem.
Right. No, I think that is a really lucid description of what Daraja did differently. Now, I think you talked about Rosalind mentioning the breaking down of walls, which is the raison d'etre of the Adaptation Research Alliance. So I want to ask you if you had a chance to reflect on the principles of the Alliance and briefly to illustrate, some of the ways in which you feel Daraja aligns with these principles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I did take a look at that, and it's a very good piece of work. While I won't focus on the specific 6 principles, what I want to focus on are the underlying themes that cut across all of these principles. So simply by the nature of our initiative's focus, we are a very action-driven initiative, and that is what I think that comes across from the principles in almost all 6 of the principles. I think Daraja also generally aligns with all the other principles, but to a very high degree, it aligns with the themes of co-design. And I think I've given you examples of that. User centricity, and also data-driven or evidence-based decision-making. Now here, data-driven is not just in terms of scientific, sort of like science data that meteorologists use, but also data of preferences of the community and what they want to see, and making sure that everything we've done, all of the pilots we've designed, are very much based on their preferences.
Right, great. Thank you, Sunana. Jane, if I could turn to you and request you to come in. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to reflect on the principles of the Adaptation Research Alliance. If so, do tell us what you think of those principles firstly, and which of the principles would the initiative that you just described to us align with? And more generally, your views on the value of an initiative such as the Adaptation Research Alliance would be really great to hear.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think we align with almost all the principles, because the work we've done has been evidence-based, because each of the 8 sectors carried out research and based their work and their proposals on the research that they carried out. And the research was basically conducted with the people of Mukuru, so they did the data collection, they were trained. So there's a lot of capacity building. I would say we covered almost all the 6 principles. I think that it is important to have an association like the one, like the research collaboration, and it is important because without collaboration between researchers, former researchers, and practitioners, I do not think that we'll be able to crack the nut that is the challenge of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Tom, over to you. Tell us what you think of the principles. I know you've indicated a couple of things that we could think about as the Alliance a bit more in their formulation, but tell us how your initiative aligns with them, and give us a nugget of your insight on why you feel an initiative such as the Adaptation Research Alliance might add value to what you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, from a SOAS, University of London has become rather famous for its work on decolonising knowledge and decolonising academia. I think the one thing perhaps that's missing, whilst it has the principles have, they're all very sound, and as somebody on the chat pointed out, they really reflect the Disaster Studies Manifesto from last year that has been signed by nearly 500 people to commit to this kind of these kind of principles in disaster studies. But this aspect of decolonizing knowledge is important. So whose knowledge counts in the research? And I think that needs encapsulating in the principles to say, this is about ensuring we're telling stories from other people's perspectives. So we are taking our kind of enlightenment-filled, Western-dominated, IPCC-led, or whatever other lenses, and trying to engage with different ways of understanding the problem and the different solutions, and the different ways of seeing it, so that we don't end up, reporting someone else's reality and claiming that as an academic breakthrough. So like, we've discovered this, and actually it's just people's lived experience. And to actually be able to start working in ways that communicate that those other narratives and different storylines is fundamental, and it'd be good to capture that in the principles as well, because it's about challenging ourselves to think outside of our own circumstances and our own ways of thinking.
Great. Yeah, I think that's really helpful. Now, while I have you, I'm giving you 10 seconds, one do and one don't for someone attempting radical collaboration on adaptation.
I'll steal one of Lucy's pet ones, which is about language. So, we try to prepare as best as possible for our work and our workshops, but with the multiplicity of languages, even within same communities in many parts of the world, and just understanding that you don't start within mind. When we produce a policy brief at the end, we will translate it into other languages. That can't be our frame that we work to. It has to be around engaging with those other languages from the start. And so for us, translating concepts and languages into the local languages and local ways of thinking has to be like a fundamental grounding when you're starting initiatives on the ground. And that can take time. And it did take time, and Lucy was, a bit of a superstar in getting to the point where, I think she had four different languages in her first workshop to kind of to wrestle with, and the mentors as well helping with that. So don't do it as an afterthought, essentially.
Thanks, Tom. That was a bit more than 10 seconds, but we'll forgive you because you're an academic and because that was such a pithy insight. Lucy, over to you. In 10 seconds, one do and one don't for someone attempting radical collaboration, and you can't repeat what Tom has just said.
I don't have anything, but just to say that we need to prepare as much as possible for the different workshops and continue to be in conversation, because this is a collaboration. So we need to continue to do check-ins. We need to continue to review and give each other feedback as we do this process. 10 seconds. Thank you. Over.
Thank you. Jane, over to you. One piece of advice that you would give to others attempting truly collaborative initiatives to reduce risk or support sustainable development.
I think to do this work is a bit like a marriage, because you can't bring change without working with others, and therefore you must forget your brand. You must forget your brand. You cannot push a brand and expect to include others. So you must forget yourself for a while. And then the other thing is that it's like a marriage. It's never a 50-50 collaboration. So you do not look, you bring people together, but they will not always do as much as you or the next person. And so you do not look at who did what and I did more than you. So you have to work on this in these different principles.
Thanks,
to be able to.
Some really valuable lessons on not being self-proportional when trying to induce radical collaboration. Thank you for that. Suleana, I'll give you the final word. One do and one don't.
Right. So often the words radical or disruptive, evoke a sense of fear of change that can lead to resistance. And unfortunately, that can become the driving attitude of all groups in a collaboration process. So do focus on creating and facilitating an environment of shared purpose and respectful collaboration. And don't invest all financial resources into just one section or one actor in the system. Instead, create a financial or a resource mechanism to support the entire system.
Thanks. I can't think of better words to end this segment on. All our wonderful experts are going to be available for more discussion in 1 minute when we go into breakout rooms. So I implore everyone who's here to stay on and join the discussion that is going to be initiated in a few seconds. A big round of virtual applause for our fantastic presenters and the really inspirational examples of radical collaboration that we've just seen. Ndoni, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much for such an informative session around radical collaboration and giving us practical examples, keywords, decolonizing knowledge, community at the center, putting in language and different concepts from the start, and most interestingly, dynamic systematic approach when we speak about radical collaboration. So the next segment is going to be, we're going to split into 3 breakout groups where us as the host will put you in that group, and within that group, we will discuss even further what it means for you to have radical collaboration within projects and any suggestions that you may have going forward based on our discussion and us going forward as an alliance. So I would like to ask Sydney, who's going to put us into these breakout groups. Then we're going to come back to discuss what are our key points. We'll have a jam board posted in each work group, and there we're going to post some real cool ideas to answer the questions. Hi, everyone. I don't think 30 minutes is enough, eh? It's just too short, too many ideas. I'm just going to give a few minutes for those that are going to still join in, just 30 seconds. And then I'm going to hand over to Bettina to give us a report back from the key points that we got from the discussions we had in our breakouts. So I think everyone is back. Bettina, you can take over.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the inspiring discussions. I would like to flag a couple of points from the discussion that I picked up. I looked at the Jamboards of the 3 groups, and let me just make a couple of comments of what I picked up, and then we'll open the floor for a couple of contributions that you'd like to make. Needless to say, we have documented on the Jamboards, so if we don't explicitly mention what was discussed in your group, please feel free to either share it here or to be assured that we will record it as it is recorded on the Jamboard. From the discussion in the groups, I find especially 3 areas that I'd like to highlight. The first and maybe foremost one is the issue of power. The issue of power differentials, and how it takes, I saw in one of the groups, trust and time to equalize that power. And I think a lot of patience as well. I think equalizing power is a very slow process. It can be very easily, I think, squashed, and where people will sort of disengage in the process. So this is a really important one. And I think we've seen in the examples some really inspiring ways in how this power equalization can happen, and how it is really important that this is, and it links me to the next one that I saw, the asking for long-term processes. So beyond project timeframes, I think when we talk about really radically changing ways we collaborate, and we acknowledge that this takes time to really have the power balance, to be sure you hear everyone, that these are long-term processes, and it is really crucial that this is enabled by two things. The one is, of course, the availability of funding to possibly really promote these long-term radical transformative processes and collaborations. And that doesn't need to necessarily mean that the funding is for 20 years. And at the same time, it can mean that actually funding continuous processes from different sources is really the answer here. So long-term processes, flexible funding, flexible reporting, and we heard earlier in our session the request to forget about your brand. That is a really important one, I think, one that we can take to heart as donors, as organizations, to really say what really matters is the collaboration. What really matters are the people that are driving this collaboration and these co-creation processes. And that leads me to the third one, the first being power, the second funding, and the third area really being process, a process that is inclusive, respectful, long-term, deliberate, flexible, meaningful engagement, overcoming resistance, because let's be aware, I think we heard earlier, sometimes the word radical can actually put people off a little. They think about conflict, they think about competition, they think about undermining structure, they think about loss of their own power. So how can we be inclusive and really bring people into these processes is, I think, the real challenge here. And maybe last but not least, before I open the floor to some comments that you might want to share from the group, I want to say we talk a lot about changes on very small scale grassroots level. This is really, really crucially important. And at the same time, I think we also can dare to be ambitious when we talk about radical collaboration and say, radical collaboration, how can we actually have radical collaboration at different levels of scale? How can we have radical collaboration on the grassroots? How can we have radical collaboration actually on regional level, maybe also on global level? Because I think a lot of the problems that we are facing are global. And so it is really important that we connect the global with the local and the local with the global. And this is another whole set of challenges. I really think we're on the right track. I'm very inspired by the session. And let me just see if anyone here would like to make some comments, some highlights from the group that you feel would be really important to share with the audience. Let me open the floor and hear if anyone here would like to share a couple of concluding thoughts from your group, from what you've heard. We'd really love to hear from you. The floor is open. Let's give it a moment. This was too scary. See if you would like to share any thoughts. Does it resonate with you in the groups? Do you feel inspired? Do you feel intimidated? Anyone who'd like to share? Please do so.
I'll start to try and break the ice. I thought you summarized so well, Bettina. I'm not sure that I have a lot more to say from our group discussion because you seem to, by magic, pulled out some of the key points. But I thought there was that point around the time boundness of relationships was one that seemed to really resonate. It takes time, as you said at the beginning, to build those relationships and break down those differentials. So I guess the question is, can we maybe this is something an ask of ARA is when donors are agreeing to sign up, or the funders of research are agreeing to sign up, that we actually ask them to take longer time frames, so that, you know, that's one of the core ways we can measure success. Maybe that's one of the ways we'll know. But yeah, that we're having impact. But I thought it was a really inspiring session. I found the discussion great. The case study is brilliant. I just encourage others to join in.
Thank you. Thank you, Claire. Any other comments, questions maybe also you have at this point? One question that I have, oh yeah, go for it. I see some tea.
Okay, thank
a microphone.
you.
The floor is yours.
Yeah, I'm getting that feeling that we are on the threshold of something path breaking. and the energy is there, and really hoping that we can build the momentum up to get the people who think similarly on board. Because yes, the points that you've captured, Bettina, as a researcher, having had experience on Asar and Karya, I think we are beginning to address a lot of those emerging thoughts we had at that time. And yeah, I won't keep the flow for too long, but it does feel like we're on to something great. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I think one of the big challenge is actually to put this into action, right? So we have been very good at saying all these amazing things we would like to achieve. And often I think, for example, you must forget about your brand. That is really relaxing to hear. It's liberating to hear. And at the same time, we really, I think, need to be very critically sort of interrogating how we can change the system to enable this to happen much easier, and to enable this to happen without people losing their jobs in the process because they feel like they are now, not conform with existing systems. I think for me, this is certainly something where ARA can make a fantastic contribution to say, can we look at the systems? Can we find enabling systems? And can we convince people that these systems are more productive, more creative, and more appropriate in delivering adaptation in the end on all scales? I think we really have to make the case. We have some pretty big asks that are going to be uncomfortable for some people, I think. Any thoughts on this? Rosalind, you looked like you were about to say something, but I will not put you on the spot. You had the spotlight. But if you'd like to take the floor, please feel free.
I think people have probably heard enough from me today, but we really do want to see a transformation in the system and in the way that we're a new approach to research for informed action. And as you say, that will be uncomfortable. To make a change, we all have to change. And I think that's what we're asking people to do through this. But there is also a lot of experience to draw upon from across the network of what has worked in different circumstances. And I think by pooling our shared experiences of that kind of gives us the confidence to make that change in the way that we're working and the way that we're working together. Thanks, Bettina.
Great. And I think with this, let me also flag that Susan. Sorry, before I move on, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Just to add one thing, perhaps it would be helpful to have clarity on how to join. That will attract many in, especially articulating also that this is going to be a space that is safe to do away with the traditional competitive way of working, but that, of course, with the radical collaboration, we are learning from each other and building each other, and of course endorsing these principles. That clarity is helpful. Yeah, over to you, Bettina.
Thank you, Susan.
And nice to see you, Bettina.
Very nice to see you again. I've some fun memories of real face-to-face meetings. I'm sad we're not face-to-face here, but I'm also glad we're saving a lot of carbon and having these conversations virtually. Any insights how to join ARA? Rosalind or Ndoni? Anyone would like to say, if I want to join, what to do?
Sure. So that's actually our thank you slide, but since you're here, that's amazing. So you do send an email to, Rosalind just sent a message on the chat, that email, ara@south.org. And there we will give you more information on how to join the ARA. Bettina, are there still more points that you would like to say before I say the thank you?
No, I will hand over to you, but just something I was asked to flag is there is a Slack channel where you're also welcome to continue this conversation. And with this, I'd like to say thanks to all the hosts and reporters of the breakout groups. And I'll hand over to you and Donnie.
All right, thank you so much, Bettina. Just a clarification there. So this slide is to say thank you to all of you guys. Please contact the ARA at southsouthnorth.org to get involved, and we will send you all the information. If you missed the principles, if you want the concept notes, if you want to understand the governance, if you want to understand if this is a safe space, send us an email and you will know how safe we are. Join us and be a part of like-minded thinkers for radical change, and be bold about it. I mean, we're already moving on it. You can also see our Twitter pages at Adapt Alliance. There we have more information, our LinkedIn, as well as our website. These links will give you more information on how to become a member and what we stand for. And we want all of you guys to join in as the ARA and become members of this alliance. Last but not least, I'd like to do my final thank yous. Bettina, you have been incredible. Thank you so much for facilitating such an inclusive and interactive session throughout the planning. I'd like to thank CBA. I'd like to thank our panelists and speakers, our co-hosts, the Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center, and IIED. Thank you so much. The ARA development team, thank you for the work you did behind the scenes. The FDCO's team, and last but not least, you attendees and potential new members of the ARA, thank you so much for joining us, and have a good evening. Our next event will be at the London Climate Action Week, which will be held on the 16th of July. For more information, please send us an email and we'll send you all the links. Thank you so much.